Many thanks for staying with us. This, of course, is still News Central special coverage of the Ondo State gubernatorial election, concurrently also with the Ondo State local government election. Welcome to The Ballot, your premier source for comprehensive coverage of the 2024 Ondo Guba elections. Of course, today millions of registered voters head to the polls to choose their next governor. And we've got you covered with real-time updates, expert analysis, and on-the-ground report from across the 18 local government areas of the state. Now, our broadcast will delve into critical issues of the elections, which includes voter turnout. In it, we will be exploring factors that influence voter participation, such as confidence in the electoral process and satisfaction with political parties. We'll also be looking at the issue of election integrity, where we will analyze INEC's handling of the process, including early deployment of electoral materials and staff logistics, including collation of results and prompt transmission of results on the INEC result viewing portal. And also we have candidates platforms where we'll be exploring comparative analysis of the incumbent candidates, that's Lucky Aiyedatiwa and Dapo Adegboye of the People's Democratic Party. There are also issues of security concerns, where we'll also explore measures in place to ensure the safety of high-risk areas, like the Riverine Ilaje region. Of course, joining us to do this will be our esteemed guest and analyst. One of them is Abimbola Oyarinu. He's a doctor and a research affiliate, or an affiliate researcher with the Institute of Africa and Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. Thank you. He's already here. He joins me physically in the studio. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I mean, let me start with you on the issue of what you've observed so far. We know that a lot of issues have arose. Voting, particularly in Ondo State, in many local governments already underway. The top contenders, we've had sound bites of the process and their feedback. We know that that of the APC said, you know what, it was okay, but the People's Democratic Party's candidate, for instance, Agbola, had some strong reservations. For you, how would you rate the process so far?
Well, so far so good. We've not heard of any serious manipulation of the process, like we're used to hearing from regular Nigerian elections. The process has been seamless. INEC has been up and doing so far. I want to commend those who have been handling the election process so far. We've heard of skirmishes here and there. There's some Ilaje communities and all that. These things are expected, but I do believe that security operatives have been able to nip that in the bud. Election has so far been peaceful, and that's why we saw the high turnouts that we got. Then we also need to look at the process leading to the elections. There was no serious threat from either candidate, and that sort of put integrity in the entire process and encourages the Ondo populace to come out to cast their ballot today, and that's why we recorded high turnout.
I mean, talking about election integrity, the issue of INEC's come to the fore. Yeah. We know that INEC just concluded the Edo elections. There were heavy reservations. Some of those issues are still in court, being contested as we speak. For many Nigerians, they are hoping that maybe this Ondo elections, election would be some sort of, what I call it, palliative to help revive the trust the people have in that institution. My question is, are there takeaways from you for the Edo elections? With what we are seeing in Ondo here?
Well, a lot of people were disappointed at how the Edo election went, but it is nothing not to be expected, of course, because of the heat the election generated. There was too many interests to be pleased in that election. The Ondo election has been completely different from the other elections. The political elites involved in the Ondo election have conducted themselves in a manner that has given confidence and integrity to the process. There's no media buzz and media condemnation of candidates. you know, like we saw with the Ondo elections, the ruffle that happened during the cycle, if I can, you know, borrow that word. The Ondo election has been more decent in its approach. The candidates have been have conducted themselves with decorum, and INEC also. I, you know, saw the electoral umpire, and we talked about the things that he had put in place to ensure that the election was seamless. And to a large extent, I think confidence will be revived with the Ondo elections.
You think so?
I think so.
I beg to differ, because the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Dapo Adegboye, did express some reservations, you know, in the process. He talked about
I mean, these things are natural when you realize that you're struggling.
Struggling. Struggling in what context?
It's a common situation in the Nigerian politics. We believe that once we are a popular candidate in an election, we deserve to win. And once things are not going our way, we start to, you know, raise issues where there are none. And in this part of the world, there are no repercussion or consequences for, you know, creating issues where there are none. You know, unlike
but he said it took about 10 minutes or so before, you know, it could be attended to in terms of the machine being able to capture its print, the entire process being seamless and all. I mean, one would expect that this is not the first time INEC, for instance, is using the beavers, you know, using all of this technology with the aim of not just improving the process, but also speeding it up. But again, we're back to discussing the same issues, the same challenges.
Well, these things are by design. The country, the electoral process, they are not working by design. It is not because these things cannot work. You imagine, for example, we have a banking system that works. That's because people cannot afford to joke with people's money. If we want the electoral process to work, I mean, we are in a technological age. This is 2024. Information can move with the speed of light. If we actually want the process to work, it will work. These anomalies are by design, and the PDP candidate is equally a party to this design that is currently not working. So nobody should cry now.
Okay, I know that earlier on today, News Central actually did some statistical analysis through, of course, on your barrel. I wish I could get those graphics up. I want you to look at what we are seeing now in terms of voter turnout over time. I mean, we can go far back as 2015 and what we are seeing now. We know that for this particular election, we have about 1.7 to 8 million, you know, who should participate in this process. We know the total population of Ondo State is about 5 million plus. We know that there are over 3,000 voting points. Many have compared what we are seeing now, today, with what we have seen in previous elections, and for some analysts, they've said that in terms of voter participation, voter turnout, voters coming out to be part of the process, it seems to be a steady decline. Do you think that is, and why is that?
Well, from the analysis we had today, I think the voter turnout for this election has been remarkable. A lot of people showed interest in the Ondo election, surprisingly, you know, considering what is happening across the country in terms of cost of living crisis, inflation, and all of that. You would expect that a lot of people will not show interest in the political process. But surprisingly, I mean, with a population of 5 million, and you have more than 40% of the population coming out to vote, we didn't even have that during the presidential elections. So we should give Ondo people some credit.
All right. So, I mean, on your screen there, you can see a breakdown analytics of voting strength in Ondo governorship election, you know, for 2024 by senatorial districts. On the screen there, you can see Ondo Central, Ondo South, Ondo North, and then you can see the, of course, chart there on your screen giving you some sort of graphic detail as regards, you know, how people are coming out to be part of the process, you know, by senatorial districts there. Some people have said that looking at, will I call it the zoning pattern in the state, there are chances that some certain candidates, might have some sort of leverage. And of course, that brings to the fore the discussion of zoning, even within a state like Ondo.
Yeah.
Do you see that playing in this case?
Of course, naturally, we pick our leaders based on primordial sentiments. We do not ask the critical questions, who's got the capacity to actually improve the lives of the people. We often talk about, oh, where is he from? Is he my kinsman? We look at his religious inclination. Like those things are what will eventually matter when they become, substantive governors. And that's why we have always got it wrong when it comes to picking leaders.
But do you think, because this issue right now that you, of course, have raised, I mean, it's as trivial as it sounds, to a very large extent, it's a big issue.
Of course.
For some people, they would say maybe it's as a result of ignorance. Political ignorance. Some would even say maybe electoral ignorance. Some would say it's as a result of our culture, our nature, our makeup. But if we cast our mind back to 2023 election, we saw the issue of tribe. That's on the national scale right now.
Yeah.
Play a key role in the election of leaders. Yeah. People are not asking competence. There are little or no questions around competence, around what the person really wants to do. It was more of a question of the region is from, or the region that should get it next. And we've seen this play out politically over time, even to the detriment of the quality of leaders. So, I mean, I know you're a researcher. Yeah. Why do you think that is? And is there a way out of this? Is it through education, enlightenment, or should we just accept it that, it's the norm, the Nigerian way?
Well, I think it is a lack of political maturity. I call it political immaturity. And we are getting there. Although we are not there yet, but we will get there eventually. You see the last US elections, a lot of people were raising issues about, female candidate, they wanted to make history. But Americans knew what they wanted. And one of the issues that bothered them was the economy. Second was immigration. And they went for the candidate who, directly spoke to their yearnings. And that is what politics should be. That's how you should pick your leaders.
Are Nigerians issue-based?
We are not issue-based. And the media is also to blame in this.
Really?
During elections, you see our media, they hardly focus on issues.
I'm sorry, not because I'm a media person, but I beg to differ on this. Because on the part of the media, I can say to a very large extent, we try our best. But you have a situation whereby even the candidates are, whether to use the word shy or scared, to interface with the media. Sometimes you call for debates, and these candidates don't show up. So what can the media do in such scenario? There's little or nothing the media can do. When you provide that platform for candidates to come and talk, let's hear you, what do you have to say to the people directly? The best many of them do is send their PAs and SAs and spokespersons to do the talking for them. So, and you still see people, go ahead and vote for a candidate they've never heard from.
Well, the media is a fourth estate in a democracy. The media has the power, the media has the capacity. What is lacking is the political will. And the media, of course, is a product of the society that it tries to inform. And the Nigerian populace itself have not shown enough interest when it comes to focusing on issues, because the masses actually are often inclined to talking about where a candidate is from, the religion they worship, and all of that. And we have seen that play out in the last 1 year since after 2023, because the question is, where the president is from, the people who are from his place, will they buy from a different market? Are we going to buy from a separate filling station? I always say one thing. If you have a company and the person you are trying to vote for, you cannot appoint that person to manage your company as a CEO, you don't have any business voting for such a person. And we have seen it play out from the last election. We are living with the repercussions of some of the decisions we made, because at the end of the day, these primordial sentiments of where you are from, where you worship, will not count. It is food, housing, and shelter that will be the important issues of the day, and that is what should determine who rules who.
Abimbola, let me leave you for a moment. So let me bring in Alan Shore into the conversation. Alan Shore is a political analyst and he joins virtually. Thank you for your time, Alan. All right, good evening. It's great to have you on the program. Now, I of course know that you have been following events in Ondo State with regards to Google polls. Are you satisfied with the process so far?
Yes, largely in the few places that I have been since morning, we must say that the process was satisfactory.
The process has been satisfactory for you?
Yes, in my community, that is Kribo, Apo Ward 2 in SL, the local government. That community has about 7 units, and I moved around. I was able to go around and see things for myself. Ballot paper and the election material came early enough. We have enough security, police and civil defense very close to the polling units. And you have the military officers as a background for security. Not many people noticed them, but when I was coming in the community, I saw the presence of a military officer at the entrance. So I knew that military were on guard. And for instance, in my polling unit, we have like about 5 INEC officials who attended to voters. And the process was satisfactory, except in my unit where we have little delay with the beavers machines because he attended to so many people almost at the same time, so the beavers was going off and on.
All right. There's also one issue that sort of came up, you know, as News Central did explore the process of this particular Ondo election. And that issue happens to be vote buying, where we, of course, understand that some individuals, you know, engaged in the process. There's even a viral video of someone who was caught with about 2 bags of money. Any of such, you know, in your area?
Where I was, I did not notice any vote buying. There was nobody who was changing money for any reason whatsoever. So I didn't notice that. Even the observer that came, I'm very sure none of such.
All right, Alan, let me leave you for a moment. Let me go back to the studio and bring in Abimbola. Now, Abimbola, I'm still going to stay on the issue of vote buying. Okay, Alan, thank you so much. Let me leave you for a moment, if you can hear me. Abimbola, I know that News Central has been on this election matter, that's particularly on Politics HQ, for close to a month, and we've had many of the stakeholders in the state speak on that program. And one issue that seemed to come up is the issue of vote buying. They even say there's a local palace in Ondo State, Digbo Sibe, meaning that to make soup, you might need to vote. I'm just trying to interpret it literally, right? This issue seems to rear a very ugly head. Maybe not use the word vote buying entirely, but voter inducement, not just money, but also materials. What's your reaction to this? Many have said it's as a result of the, what I call it, poverty in the land.
Yeah, poverty in Nigeria has been weaponized. It will shock you to know that our political elite enjoy the situation as it is. The status quo is by design because the crop of political elites we have today would not be able to contest and win in a local government election if our people are not hungry. You know, because
you said the crop of leaders would not be able to win even local government elections if the people. So you are saying that they've used hunger as a weapon. Is that what you're saying?
Of course, poverty is by design. The crop of leaders we have today, it will be foolhardy to think that they can actually take us out of poverty, because nobody wants to commit suicide, as it were. No normal person will commit suicide. And it will be political suicide for our political elite to take Nigerians out of poverty, because that will mean the end of their political careers. You know, so it is important that things stay the way it is for them to continue to parade themselves in politics. Because, I mean, what ideology do they stand for? By the time people are no longer hungry, they start asking critical questions. Because, you see, hunger kills intelligence. And most Nigerians are hungry, you know, so they are not asking the critical questions, and that leads us to vote buying. I mean, how do you explain giving someone 5,000 naira and you are supposed to steal from that person for 4 years, and that person still accepts that deal? You know that is hunger-induced. That is weaponization of poverty at its prime. So it will continue as long as status quo remains.
All right, let me bring in Chukwuemeka Ezediro into the conversation. Chukwuemeka is also a political analyst. He joins us now. Chukwuemeka, thank you for joining. I would like to believe that, of course, you have been monitoring the process too, just like many Nigerians. Are you comfortable with what you have seen so far? Chukwuemeka, if you can hear me, we cannot hear you. You appear to be muted.
Okay, so sorry about that.
Okay, this is good. Let's go ahead.
So I've been following the elections, and I must say that so far the elections have been peaceful in most parts of Ondo State. Yes, we've had 1 or 2 incidents of vote buying, and the DSS operatives have been dealing with that. But generally, we must commend INEC. This seems to be a much improved performance from the last election, which was conducted in Ondo State. And most importantly, we must mention that the election materials got to their various polling units on time. The elections generally started on time, and there have been no major issues we've come across so far. So yes, so far so good. But the real crux of the matter usually doesn't come during the elections. It will come at the point of collation of results.
And of course, you really raised a big issue there, talking about collation of results. But just like I asked Abimbola, are there takeaways, you know, from the Edo elections, you know, as regards what we are seeing in Ondo State?
Yes, I would say there are takeaways from the Edo election, and we've seen that INEC has tried to make some improvements in the Ondo State elections. So one, the election materials, but more importantly, we've seen that there's some sort of order, and that the people, the candidates from the various parties did sign the peace accord in Akure, and they generally stuck to the terms of that peace agreement. Contrast that with scenes from the Ondo State election, where we had sporadic incidents of all sorts of electoral violence, all sorts of bad behavior from participants in the Ondo State electoral process. And again, we must stress the fact that the people in Ondo State have come out. Now, the general average from the previous elections has hovered somewhere between 25% and 30% of the total number of registered voters. I suspect that we may beat that with this Ondo State election, but the final figures will come from INEC maybe sometime tomorrow or early next week. And it shows that the people are invested in the process, that despite everything going on around them, from the economic downtime to the fact that the political parties themselves in Ondo State didn't really put on a good show during the campaign process window, they've come out nevertheless to cast their vote. Yes, some people will say that there have been incidents of vote buying, but generally they've come out, because if you do not come out, then what's the point complaining about the government in process? The first step of the electoral process is to come out on election day and cast your vote. Dispel the notion or the myth that your votes don't count. Because if your votes do not count, there'll be no basis for an election in the first place. So yes, these are some of the takeaways for me, given what transpired in the Ondo State election and what we're seeing today in the Ondo State election.
Okay, let me leave you for a moment, Chukwuemeka. Let me bring in Alan into the conversation back. Alan Showore is a political analyst. Okay, I understand that we, of course, have lost connection with Alan. Let me bring in Nelson Ekujimi. Nelson, great to have you on the program. Of course, yes, great. So my question to you is this, Nelson. Are you comfortable with what you've seen so far?
Well, like we say in our local parlance, so far so good. What I would have loved to see, maybe I didn't get the best, but the fact that the election has gone peacefully is something that gladdens my heart. Because like we have always advocated, election should be a festival of voters, even though people have turned it into a theater of war. So this is my country. I can only hope and wish that we can improve on those shortcomings that we have observed in the process. But as far as we are concerned for now, we just have to make do with what we have and continue to hope that we all play our parts to make it better.
Nelson, you don't sound extremely excited or, confident in the process. I mean, there seems to be a bit of reservation in your voice. Why is that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. For example, I woke up this morning as early as 6:40 a.m. I saw INEC personnel already stationed at the polling stations, and I was like, wow, this is shocking. In most places, by 8:30, we have 18 local governments in the state. By 8:30 a.m., the INEC personnel had commenced accreditation and voting. And we saw the voters coming out to vote. In some places, there was a large turnout. In other places, there were no turnout. We hoped that as the day went by, people will come out, because you know the attitude of our people. Our people are laid back, if you understand what I mean by that term. People tend, what concerns all of us, some people will abdicate that responsibility that, okay, you people go and start first. I will come and join you later. Or when we see that you are there, then we know it is really happening. So people have, those are some of our shortcomings as the people. INEC has done well. The Beavers machine functioned efficiently. The voters came out in their numbers. In some places they were low. In other places, from the reports we gathered, the turnout was good. But until the final result is out, we won't be able to know the total number of votes vis-a-vis the registered voters. But for the fact that the election has been peaceful, the environment has been calm, is something that gives me confidence. So I don't have any reservations of not being enthusiastic. No, absolutely not.
All right. Nelson, let me leave you for a moment. Let's, of course, come back to the studio to Abimbola. Now, Abimbola, definitely, I want to believe that you've had some of the things that Nelson and also Chukwuemeka has said. One issue that also keeps coming up is voter behavior. Will I call it the non-challenge of quite a number of Nigerians, even if you look at the last elections too, compared to the entire population of Nigeria, and then maybe you subsume it to the adult population, voting population, those that even registered to vote, and those that picked up their cards to vote, minus those that now came out to vote. If you collate all of that, you'll find out that the number, in terms of statistics, seems to have shrunk compared to maybe places like the US election, where this particular election saw an explosion in terms of voter turnout. Over the time, in the case of Nigeria, it seems that this number keeps shrinking and shrinking. That's voter turnout on election day. Why do you think this is?
Because a lot of people have come to understand Nigerian politics to be what it is, a jamboree of sorts. You voting leaders, and all you see is that they only go there to satisfy themselves and their friends. People are no longer committed to the process. That's one major reason. The second reason is the integrity of the electoral umpire. A lot of people do not think that we can actually conduct free and fair elections in this country. So until we start putting those things in place, for example, what is happening in Ondo will further give credence to INEC, because we have to give credit to the umpire in Ondo for a job well done.
So far?
So far.
Okay. Let me ask Chukwuemeka the same question. Over time, maybe we should play with some statistics on the screen. Some of what our, of course, data room did put together through ONYE that was presented. We know that in this particular election, for instance, we know the total number of registered voters, a little above 2 million. Polling units, about 3,000 plus, wards, 203, local government areas, 18. Total population in that state, 5 million plus. That's for 2004 governorship poll. I know she went back a bit to do as far back as 2015, and you could see that steadily, even though we had people, total number of registered voters, in a way sizable. Those that collected their PVCs at the end of the day to come out to cast their votes, the number kept shrinking over time. I want to ask Chukwuemeka the same question. Why do you think that is?
Okay, so first of all, the name is Chukwuma, not Chukwuemeka.
Oh, I sincerely apologize for that, Chukwuma.
No, that's fine, that's fine. Now, so why that has happened, but let me start this way. For this election, INEC did announce that there were 2 million registered voters in Ondo State, and 1.75 million voters had collected their permanent voters cards. So that is a very significant feat, according to INEC. Now, to your question, why it has continued to decline over time, there are a number of reasons. One is the trust deficit that exists between the people and the government. The people have little or no faith in the electoral process and have further diminished faith in the process of governance. Now, we must also remember that even the process that throws off these candidates for the parties is not a process that is really open to the public. We just wake up one day and we hear Mr. X or Mr. Y has been elected as a candidate. Then we are then presented with the fact that we have like 6 or 7 bad candidates and we have to choose the best out of the lot. Then you go to election day, all the shenanigans that have previously happened with previous elections, from ballot box snatching to voter intimidation to pure outright violence, then to figures that are announced on the day of collation as the final figures. We're also presented with incidents where the total number of votes declared far outstrips the total number of accredited voters, and it goes on and on. And as this goes on from electoral cycle to electoral cycle, people are more disillusioned, they're more disinterested, and they're increasingly demotivated to participate in the electoral process. Also, we must point out that the Independent National Electoral Commission has failed in its responsibility to educate the people on political information and voter information. It's right there in Section 2 of the Electoral Act 2022. Also, the National Orientation Agency, which is a neutral agency, has not done what it ought to do with regards to informing the people, educating the people. So people continue to go away with this widespread myth that the electoral process doesn't really matter, that the powers that be will install their candidates, and that's irrespective of their wishes or their choices, what will be, will be. And sadly, that is where we've gotten to. How this will be repaired is a matter of time and commitment from INEC, from the relevant agencies, from the governments in power, and a strengthening of our institutions.
All right, Chukwuma, let me bring in Nelson into the conversation. Now, switching it up a bit. One issue that has been discussed, extensively in this process, even to the build-up of this process, is the issue of vote buying. I know that on Politics HQ, just like I mentioned earlier, we've had stakeholders from the state, even analysts, x-ray this matter. I'd like you to speak on it and why it seems to be rife now.
Well, please let me quickly respond to what the last speaker just said about people not believing in the process. I think we must understand one fact. You cannot give what you don't have. For example, in this election, if you go to almost 50% of the voting stations, you hardly find 3 party agents. What you find are just 2 party agents. And tomorrow morning, a party that didn't have an agent in 10 polling units out of about 3,900 plus will come out and tell you that the candidate has been rigged up. And you ask, where is your evidence? And some persons will run with such characters. So a lot of times people run the commentary about the electoral process on the basis of ignorance. And let me inform us all. Before election takes place, the PO will come with his materials. He announces the ballot papers he has. He brings out the beavers machine. He opens it for everybody and says, look, the beavers machine is empty. No figure has been inputted into it. And you see it. After the accreditation and counting of votes, everybody is present. The voter, the party agents, INEC officials, security agencies, observers, we are all present. At the end of the exercise, the presiding officer, who is the PO, announces that I start sorting of ballot papers. And before I start sorting of ballot papers, it will tell you on the beavers machine, we have 120 accredited. You know, the beavers machine is for accreditation, it's not for voting. Then we start the sorting and counting of ballot papers according to party score, ballot scored by parties. And at the end of the whole exercise, when we tabulate the whole scores and what is on the beavers, we realize we have the same figure. So tell me who is manipulating who. People just sit down in the comfort of their homes, in the comfort of their offices, and lampoon a system that they are not ready to take their time to study, to know that we are past that stage. The era of the former President Olusegun Obasanjo and Maurice Iwu of then led INEC. We're in an INEC today whereby even if you don't have an agent, the beavers machine can provide enough proof for you. But they will not want to run with the facts. Rather, they will run with wide assumptions. Talking about vote buying, you and I know for free that vote buying is as old as humanity. Unless and until we have an informed citizenry, why vote buying continue to thrive is because some of our citizens who are involved in these acts are not informed. Because the question I ask any person, any eligible voter, is that how much is your life worth on the election day that you can sacrifice, that you are ready to sacrifice 4 years of it? And I don't get an answer. So even in developed times, we see vote being bought, but it's not a good commentary. It's something we must all condemn. So people coming to lampoon our electoral system because you see pockets of vote buying in some places, I don't agree to that because I don't have any other society. If there's a problem, we must all put our heads together. Just this afternoon, when we went out doing the voting observation, I was telling my colleagues, I told them we have to conduct a survey. What is it about the Nigerian voter that you have to go into his house, to go and knock on his door for him to come and vote? If not for the parties, even these figures you are quoting, you won't get it. It is the parties that employ canvassers to go and lure voters from their homes. People don't understand the reason why we vote.
But shouldn't also there be sort of some sort of repercussion for parties that are linked to this? Maybe in a way that will serve as deterrent, because some have put it forward that, look, people unfortunately would always be hungry. Some people would always be greedy. But why not attack it from the source, which more or less is linked to political parties? Maybe when they engage in this, there should be some sort of punitive measure. Do you think that will sort of check this?
I agree that there should be punitive measure, but the source is the seller. If the parties come to the polling, for example, I'm as an adult, as old I am, before election, they already make up my mind who I'm going to vote for. Why must I get to the polling station and I'm looking left and right, waiting for party agent A to give me money or party agent B? I've been an election observer in the last 20-something years of our electoral process. I see situations where an eligible voter will come to the polling station will collect X from party A, will collect from party B. We have seen situations where after collecting from party B, the honest one among them will return the resources that he got from party A. But for some, they will collect everything together. Whether that determines how they vote, I don't know, because I don't see where they vote. Mine is to understudy the process, that when you got there, did you have a PVC? Yes. Were you screened? Were you authenticated with the machines? Yes. Were you given a ballot paper? Yes. Did you go there to cast your ballot? Yes. Where you cast your ballot is none of my business. I don't have that is your own private property, is your private right. But what we are saying here is that if we have an informed citizenry, even in polling stations, when the buyers want to buy, they look at your status now. You can't, somebody like me or you, Dapo, will somebody come and tell you if you go to the polling station that Oga come, take this X, come and vote for a party. It will know he's looking for trouble. It won't even come near you. But when the sellers are already offering the buyer that I'm for sale, what do you do in such a situation? So it is for us to have an informed citizenry that will understand that the essence of voting is to better your life for the next 4 years, and not for a pot of porridge that you cannot even eat on that election day or maybe the day after. Oh. That is very critical for us.
Okay, let me bring this back to the studio. I mean, that video you saw a while ago is a video sent to us by Kayode Babayomi, is the chairman of the AAC in Ondo State, is presently also in Ondo State. He actually did capture a moment of vote buying. He spoke to us about it here on News Central, and that, of course, is what you saw on your screen a while ago. There's also another viral video in Ondo State where the DSS actually did catch someone with 2 bags of money. I mean, that particular viral video had the man stashed, 2 bags of money, basically to induce voters in the trunk of his car. Let me come to you, Abimbola. This issue of vote buying. I know that Nelson has actually nipped on, some matters around it. Yeah. But I would like us to also look at it from the angle of the political parties. People would always be hungry, right? Some people, they would always collect money, especially if it's free. But do you think that attacking it also from the angle of the source, which is the political parties, in a way would help and foster accountability in that?
Well, I mean, it speaks to the weakness of our institutions. Most people are not punished for electoral-related offenses. A lot of the political parties, see election as something they have to. The electoral process is very expensive in this climate. So you cannot take money away from politics. And for you to say the political parties should be encouraged to stop vote buying is like telling them to commit political suicide. Because one of the reasons why they've been able to sustain themselves in power is because they understand that eventually, irrespective of what they do in power, they can eventually buy the conscience of Nigerians with 5,000 naira. And for as long as that continues, we will always have charlatans in power. I would also like to go back to what we said about the shrinking of the voting public. One of the major reasons that has contributed to that situation is the process itself. First and foremost, you have to go through thousands of people to register to get the PVC. Then after registering, you have to contend with getting the PVC. After that, you have to go and register to vote, after which you now eventually vote. How many people have time for such a laborious process for a system that you don't even trust? That's a problem in itself. Today we have national identity numbers, and we can actually factor that into our electoral process where people do not need PVC. All you need is to prove that you are a Nigerian and you are qualified to vote. So disenfranchisement from INEC itself contributes to voter apathy in the country. I just wanted to add that.
So you're saying that the national identity card, for instance, can suffice even as a voting card or voting criteria in a way?
Because constitutionally, what you need to be a voter in Nigeria is to be a Nigerian.
A Nigerian. Okay, you're talking about collapsing the process. But Nelson, before, of course, we bring in Bernard Akede, I'd like you to stay with you on something. You did raise the issue of political parties not having, many political parties, that is, not having adequate representation even at the polling units, and that many of them will now come out to cry foul at the end of the process saying they were rigged out. Now, that brings to the question of the structure of many of these political parties. I've actually been in gatherings where they say some of them constitute, in terms of the makeup, husband, wife, and, you know, really funny. So my question to you is this: in terms of structure of political parties, maybe I should just put it out to you this way. Do you think that some political parties should actually even exist in the first place?
Absolutely not. If you look at the trend in our democracy, you observe that some days to elections, parties, maybe 8, 9, 10, 12 out of 15 parties will just come up 3 days to the election and say we are endorsing candidate A. So you ask, does a party exist to endorse candidates of another party or to throw up its own candidates to contest and win election? From my own little understanding of studying politics, the essence of a political party is to contest election, win, and run the affairs of the country for the good of all. Not for us as a political party to have been existing maybe 3, 4 years ago, come 72 hours to an election, we now say, oh, our party is endorsing candidate of a so-so party. As if we are not a political party, we are just a mere pressure group. So those are the questions. Some parties don't deserve to be in existence. And I'll tell you this for free. You go to polling stations, you hardly find, look at the last presidential election, for example. A party that claimed to have won, out of 176,000 polling units, that party had just 133,000. And even that 133,000 that they claimed to have, the tribunal and the Supreme Court said they never tendered any document to validate the fact that they deploy party agents to polling stations. So if you don't have an agent at a polling station to guide your votes, your eyes, your nose, and your ears, what is the essence of you being a political party? So, like you have rightly said, some of these parties don't deserve. They've just become a menace on the system, because I don't see any reason why my party will just wait for 72 hours or maybe 48 hours and say we are endorsing. Are we existing to go and endorse or to contest election and win to run the affairs of the country, the community, the environment, or the state, wherever? So for me, that tells you clearly that some of these parties should go under.
All right, Nelson, thank you so much. I would like to, of course, take the opinion of others, but I understand that we need to go on a quick break. Of course, when we return, we will definitely pick up. But I'd like to say a big thank you to Nelson for your time so far. Thank you once again, Nelson. And of course, we'll be coming back with Abimbola and Chukuma. Thank you once again. Do stay with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for staying with us. This, of course, is still the Ballot News Central's special coverage of the Ondo State governorship election and also the Ogun State local government elections happening today concurrently. I still have my guest with me. Chukuma Ezedire is actually a legal practitioner and also a public affairs analyst. He joins virtually. I have Abimbola Oyarinu. Bimbola Oyarinu is a researcher and also a public affairs analyst who joins me physically in the studio. And of course, I had earlier Nelson Ekujimi and also Alan Shore, who did make their contribution on the program. And joining the conversation right now will be News Central's Bernard Akede, who is live in Ogun State covering the local government elections in that area. Let's start off with Bernard. Bernard, bring us up to speed. By the way, you look good.
Yeah, thank you, Dapo. Like they say, we don't look like what we're going through. But I would accept that compliment anyways. Can you hear me, Dapo?
Yes, very well. So what's happening?
All right, so, the day is winding down, and so is the activity of the day, talking about the local government elections. We currently are in the premises of the Ondo State Independent Electoral Commission's office. Here is where all the results from the 20 local government areas concerning the local government elections will be brought back to. Behind me, you probably can see some people gathered under certain tents and canopies. These are electoral officers who are bringing back the results and then waiting for others. The result has, they've started collating the results, in ones and twos. But we were able to speak to the information officer, so to speak, trying to get her to join us live. She declined and said the only person who's authorized to speak will be the chairman, who apparently is still in the field at the moment. And then I asked, how long does she reckon that it will take before eventually we get the results? She said, remember again, there are 20 local governments in the state, and some of these local governments are very far away from here. Some are across water in some cases. So worst case scenario, this might continue till tomorrow morning, the collation and announcement of final results eventually. But anyway, here is where everything is going to take place. The results will be brought here. The announcements will be made here. The collations, everything will be here, in these premises. And then to my right here is where the vehicles that will bring these results and bring these officers will be parked before eventually they are dispersed. Also, security operatives earlier were here. Some are still under the trees there. Police officers who escort these sensitive materials and the officials to this particular position, all seated there also to secure this particular premises and ensure that everything is safe until the final results are collated, counted, and the winners are announced.
All right, now let's also talk about voter turnout. Was the turnout impressive?
Not, unfortunately not. First of all, we do know that when it comes to local government elections, for those who have the experience, the turnout is usually not so good. But for this one, this really was poor in my own standard, to be honest. So many places we go to, very few people there. Some places didn't even have enough people to form queues. So you get there, people just voting in ones and twos, and then when they are done voting, you have the electoral officers seated waiting for more people to come. I think worthy of note is also the fact that the election didn't start early enough in so many places that we visited. In fact, all the places we visited, it didn't start early enough. I put that question to the information officer here, and she said, well, sadly, sometimes they have logistic challenges, and today's exercise was one of those exercises where they really did have logistic challenges. Upon arriving the state, when we got here this morning, the first local government we went to initially, Obafemi Owode, as at 10:25 a.m., it was still a beehive of activities where you would have expected that all the materials would have left that particular local government office and would have gone to the different wards and polling units. And that just basically gave me an idea of what the day was going to look like. And truly, it looked funny. I'll wrap this question up by telling you what we saw. The next polling unit we went to, where as at 11:25, that was when the electoral officers just started arriving, and then they started pasting the pictures and the names of registered candidates on the wall. And then, the activity didn't start until about past 12.
All right, Bennett, just a quick one also. What do you, in terms of way of life of the state, did the election affect people's normal day activity, or was it just business as usual? Were residents even conscious of the fact that an election, is holding today in the state?
Well, yes, residents were conscious of the fact that the election was holding, and then for those who, for whatever reason, were not, aware of that fact, at least the fact that there was a no movement order placed around the state would let them know that something different was happening. The roads were closed at certain places. Some vehicles that disobeyed that order were halted at police points, except for, will I say, press movements, security movements, and other agencies or other workers who necessarily had to move. But there was no movement across the state, and I believe that that's how it's done, in and around places where there's election. But again, it was just quite sad that the turnout was really, really low. In some places, children were just playing football on the streets because the streets were very, very empty. So there's the knowledge that the local government elections are ongoing today. But how the turnout it turned out to be very, very low is something that really, really should be discussed eventually after the elections.
Bernard Kede, thank you so much for the update, and of course we'll keep tabs. Once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let me bring Chukwuma into this. Your reaction quickly to what you've had as regards the Ondo State, the Ogun State local government election, particularly in the area of turnout. We know that since that Supreme Court ruling that at the local government level, there must be democratically conducted elections in order to even get paid, directly from the federal purse. And right now we are seeing this happen in Ogun State. What's your take from what you've had from our correspondent there?
Okay, thank you very much. So listening to your correspondent, what he said has literally tallied with what we've witnessed since we returned to democracy 25 years ago, and even in the flurry of local government elections that have held since Supreme Court gave its judgment circa June or July this year. So we find that we have an election. I'm pretty certain that 80% of the candidates are not known to the voting public, and that people just see this as an impediment to their daily lives, and they wish this exercise will be done with quickly so they can return to normalcy. Now we find that many of the state governments are hurriedly conducting elections and ensuring that they are seen on paper to be complying with the Supreme Court judgment, such that the local government councils can receive funding from the federal allocation accounts. Now, beyond all of this, what is the legitimacy of such local government councils that are elected in such situations or such arrangements? We find that there's an increasing disconnect between the people and the local government councils that are supposed to bring the last mile of governance and administration to them. And then we then find that because there's the growing disconnect, they are unable to play their part in nation building. And as a result, we find little or no development spread across the local government. And this is not limited to Ogun State in particular. And then we wonder why we're where we are. Now, it's sad that the good people of Ogun State did not come out in the numbers to participate in this electoral process. And it's really bewildering, it's confusing, and I'm not sure where they expect to go, because if you refuse to come out and then all sorts of interesting characters are then elected into office, you're stuck with them for the next 3 years. Where does that leave you? 2, if they know that they got into office in spite of your absence from the polls, what does that portend for good governance, for good administration, and even for improvement in your daily lives? It's a big worrying issue, and it's not limited to the local government elections alone. We need to figure out why we do not come out for elections, and we need to address it.
All right, now Chukwuma, talking about accountability, let me bring this to the studio, to Abimbola. It's also been touted that, to a very large extent, the governors of the state, sort of still have a large amount of influence in spite of the Supreme Court ruling, on who gets what or who becomes what at the local government level. You talked about the issue of accountability, that once people are not entirely involved in the process to bring in a candidate, they more or less do not feel accountable to the people. So I would like you to speak on this, particularly in the area of, number one, voter involvement at that level, and also the influence of the state governors in these respective states.
Yeah, well, the Supreme Court judgment is still relatively new. It will take time before we evolve into having a strong local government system, because as you are aware, we didn't just get here overnight. It was a systemic approach to kill the local government system, and it will also take time to revive it. The influence of state governors, when it comes to local government affairs, is appalling, because in Ogun State, for example, where the election is being conducted, if you go into the inner streets and all of that in Ogun State, it's nothing to write home about. and it's across the state. So when you see people not turning out for local government elections, you can tell why. Because they don't feel the presence of local government, administration. The local government is mostly there just to harass the people, as it were, just to get local taxes, and that's it. And that is it. They do not know them. And looking at the election itself.
So you're saying to a large extent there is no value for the people.
For now, there's no value. And the election process itself, the people don't know who they are voting for. Most times, the people contesting, because it is they are handpicked by the state governor, they do not even bother printing posters, they do not go on rallies. The opposition party, of course, do not have money to fund the process. So it's an entire jamboree, as it were.
Let's bring this conversation back to, of course, Ondo State. We know that before we went on that break, for instance, Nelson Kujimi did raise a pivotal issue. I asked him a question as regards the number of political parties, and if at all some of them should even be in existence. I said I was going to take your opinion on this because the issue of structure comes in. Structure meaning having, number one, the right amount of resources to mobilize, personnel across the polling units that would monitor and ensure that, they get accurate data for the party, and also in terms of what I call it, leadership of this political party. So I would ask you the same question right now. Do you think some political parties should even be in existence?
Well, like my colleague said earlier, most of these political parties should not be in existence. Some of their leaders, in fact, should be arrested because of the way they've conducted themselves and the parties over time. Because you see, they overeat the system. They tend to make a mess and mockery of the electoral process. I mean, picking leaders for a country should be as important as the air we breathe. And when we have people who set up political parties just to have political influence, just to be able to use that political party to negotiate and leverage themselves in politics and to get what INEC gives every election cycle, that should be considered a crime, and people like that should be brought to book. Because what you see most times is that these political parties go to sleep and only wake up months to the elections.
All right. Let me, of course, leave you for a moment, Abimbola. Let's bring in News Central's correspondent, Amadine, to the conversation. Amadine, thank you for joining. If you can hear me, what do we know now? Amadine, if you can hear me well, we are unable to hear you. So it appears you're muted. So maybe we might just we might come back to you in a few minutes, Amadine. Okay, I understand we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, I said that in a lot of areas around the larger local government area of Ondo State, voting has ended, counting has ended. You know, the communities are small. A lot of the communities are small. We are at the Bokoda community, one of the largest communities here at the larger local government area. I'm presently standing at the Kurubene. It's called Kurubene. It's a small community within Igbokoda. And here also, this is supposed to be the mega primary school. This is supposed to be one of the largest polling points here at Igbokoda. Here, counting has ended. The APC took the day here at the polling units, which is just behind me there. There are about 175 voters, registered voters. The APC scored 120, the PDP 53, the NNPP 1, and the NRM 1. So voting has ended. Most of the INEC polling officials have moved to the RAC center. From there, they will now be moving to the local government collation center.
All right, Amadine, did you notice any hitches so far? Maybe, issues of logistical challenges, violence, or voter inducement?
Now, one spectacular thing that has happened here is that if you follow the previous elections in Ondo State, the one that happened a few years, 4 years ago to be precise, and other earlier elections, the larger local government area usually receive their materials very late because it's a largely riverine local government area. Over 70% of the communities, they are along the mangrove forest, the riverine beds of the local government. So materials usually get to them very late. But I think the strategy INEC has employed in this election has been spot on. Because by the time we got to Obenla community, which is about 40 minutes from Ugokada, no, not Ugokada, the jetty where we had to enter boats. By the time we got to Obenla community, we were amazed that the INEC officials had already arrived and were preparing to commence the elections. We spoke to some who were on ground. They said that the officials arrived between 7 a.m. to 7:30, that a lot of them slept at the rack centers, so it was easy. Yesterday, when we went to the water side, we observed also, we saw the INEC boat, we saw the boats ferrying a lot of INEC officials. So I think the deployment was sometime yesterday evening. But in terms of logistics, INEC did very well and they should be commended. We are also hoping that once voting ends in those areas, they should be moved quickly to the state capital so that they can support the collation process.
All right, Ahmadine, thank you so much. But also, before I let you go, in terms of the atmosphere there, the feedback from residents of the area, what is it like?
Now, we spoke to a lot of them after they had casted their votes, some before they voted. And the excitement in the air is that the two governorship candidates are from this area, especially the APC, who is the sitting governor. Because usually, the riverine community does not pull so much weight in terms of voting numbers. So the best they get are usually, or rather, is usually a deputy governorship slot. But because of what happened when the deputy governor had to ascend and become the substantive governor and now vying for the ticket, there's that excitement in the air. Because some of them said that since 1990,
Ahmadine, are you there? It looks like we, of course, have lost connection.
Who candidates from this represent them as the governor of the state. But so for the fact that the governor is from this area, the excitement, a lot of them said that they were going to be peaceful so that the votes in this area will not be cancelled according to INEC guidelines, because the guideline states that anywhere there is violence, that polling unit has to be cancelled. So a lot of them are looking forward to whatever outcome the election will present to them.
All right, Ahmadine Uye, thank you so much for the update. We'll definitely keep tabs with you. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, too.
All right, let me go to Chukuma. Chukuma, you had a number of things that, of course, our correspondent who is live in Ogun State did say. You might just want to have some reaction. But I'd like you to add to some of the things you would say, the fact that the number of political parties, and if at all, some of them, just like I asked Abimbola, should be on the ballot. Should they even be in existence?
Okay, thank you very much. Whilst I agree, or I will concede that a good number of the political parties out there, merely briefcase parties that do not exist outside the briefcases, I must make the point or stress the point that it is important for our democracy that outside the two major parties, smaller parties are allowed to grow. Now, if we say that all the smaller parties, or we suggest that parties that are not on the ground, that do not have the structure, the financial might or strength, should be removed, then we're left in a very serious situation. Now, it's no gainsaying that the economy hasn't been the best this year, and that to some extent affected the campaigns that we've seen, both in Edo State and even Ondo State, and even, I dare say, the Ondo State local government elections. Now, nevertheless, we must decide as a people what exactly do we want? Even with the political parties we consider the big guns, that is the APC and the PDP, they're not properly political parties in the true sense of the word. They're just a conglomeration of different or disparate individuals that have managed to wield or accumulate power over time. Now, where do we go from here? It is sad, just like Mr. Nelson said, that through 24 hours, 48 hours to an election, you find candidates or parties stepping down and supporting another candidate. And it begs the question, were they really in the race from the beginning? And I dare say with Nigeria, we'll always have things distorted. Nevertheless, there are some genuine small parties that will need to grow. And we must also factor in this point that everything is not fast food. Everything won't happen overnight. Some parties need to grow over a period of time. So the fact that a party is set up this year, contests this electoral cycle, doesn't win any seats, doesn't win any position, doesn't mean the party should be automatically scrapped. Parties will grow over time, and you have to present a proper ideology that the people can resonate with, the people can identify with, and they can subscribe to. If you pick 10 Nigerians at random, ask them what is the ideology of the APC, what is the ideology of the PDP, what is the ideology of the Labour Party. You'll be surprised to find out that at least 8 cannot properly identify any portion of the ideologies of the 3 main parties I've identified.
And that brings to the question, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and that brings to the question the issue of political ideology. Which led me also to ask if at all many of these parties should be in existence. So you find out that, I mean, let's look at the American model, for instance. You have the Republicans, you have the Democrats. There are clear political templates in terms of ideologies, why they exist. But for many of these parties, you really cannot tell what their political leanings are. And, I mean, if the foundation cannot be defined clearly, don't you think that that is a major problem?
No, so we're on the same page. Remember that I started by admitting and conceding the fact that a number of these political parties are briefcase parties. They don't exist outside folders or briefcases. And for that reason, they should go. However, it will be incorrect to say that all of them are briefcase parties. They're actually parties you can identify what it is they're trying to do, what it is they're about, and how they intend to go about the process. So we must separate the wheat from the chaff. 80% or 90% of the political parties in existence in Nigeria today, I will respectfully submit, should not be existing because they only appear to be waiting to collect the funds that come from the federal government every electoral cycle. And once that is done, they go back into oblivion and reappear again every 4 years, just like the appearance of Haley's Comet. However, I will respectfully maintain there are political parties that know what they're doing, and it's only a matter of time before we begin to see the fruit of what it is they're actually serving right now.
All right, let's move to another critical issue here, and that has to do with how expensive our elections have become. We know that across the world, right? Elections are pretty much expensive. I mean, the just concluded American presidential election, billions of dollars, went into it on both ends, right? Even though we know that elections are expensive, but in the case of Nigeria, you find out that for many experts, they feel that the process can be cheaper. Where am I going with this? From the picking of forms, even at party level, it runs into millions. That's minus campaign money. We had somebody earlier on the program today who said that as a candidate of a party, you must have at least 4 kinds of budget, from pre-campaign to campaign itself, and then post-campaign. Part of post-campaign has to do with the judiciary. So, I mean, you look at all of this, and all of this runs into billions of naira. A candidate that eventually emerges winner, what do you think his priority would be? So let me start with Abimbola. The cost of elections in Nigeria. We are not even going to the ones you would use for some candidates we use to induce voters, just to even get into the race, right? What can be done?
Well, we are not going to recreate anything. We've seen how it is done in saner climes, and we need to empower the state institution, which is INEC, to do the right thing. But I keep saying, the politicians that we are asking to do the right thing, they know once they put these things in place, it is political suicide for them, because they can only thrive in this kind of environment. You see, charlatans grow in a chaotic environment, and that is where they thrive, and that's a system they would like to entrench, because political parties should be sponsored by the populace, and the kind of money that is pumped into political parties should be monitored. It should be guided. But in our own case, you see big guns, big top men investing in politics, and when you invest, you expect returns. So what happens eventually is that when these political parties win, you can not blame the investors for demanding for proceeds of their investments.
Proceeds of investment. I mean, such interesting choice of words. Chukwuma, before I bring in Cynthia Mabulu into the conversation, I would like to quickly take your reaction on this issue of the monetization of the process.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective is from the political parties themselves. How many members do they have? Because they have very few members, each time they need to campaign, they have to go out to where the people are. And to do that, you have to pay money. So you're looking at getting a venue. You're looking at renting sound equipment. You're looking at renting audiovisual equipment. You're looking at security. You're looking at the printing of T-shirts, souvenirs to get them. You're looking at transportation costs to get the perceived or supposed supporters to the venue and back. You're looking at refreshments, the cost of refreshments to keep them there throughout the process. If they had organic supporters or party members, some of these costs would be reduced. Now, more importantly, right, we all know what it costs to have a radio ad running, a TV ad running, even having an ad running on the internet. Again, it boils down to party membership. If you had genuine party members in their hundreds, in their thousands, in their millions, they would willingly and voluntarily support and provide some of the funding required. Okay. Even if you make the cost of nomination forms free, there's still some costs you cannot run away from as a political party.
All right, Chukwuma, you definitely pick up from there. I'm sorry to, of course, interrupt your line of thought, but I understand that we really need to bring in Cynthia Mabulu from Yaga. She's currently in Ondo State. Cynthia, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Good evening. Malu is the surname.
Okay. Thank you for, of course, that update on the correction there. But quickly, what have you observed?
Today it's been quite calm in the state, and I'm sure a lot of your reporters must have shared that with you. From our data, Yaga Africa deployed 300 stationary observers to a 300 sample polling unit and an additional 25 mobile observers. And what we did observe was an early commencement of polls compared to Edo. We recorded earlier commencement of polls. At least as at 9:30, about 91% of polling units have commenced. And if you look at the senatorial district disaggregation, only the southern part, so the Ondo North and South, that had about 86% commencement by that time. By 9:30, the other senatorial districts were in over 90%. But one of the major findings from this election was is the one, I think, the issues around the money. A lot of reports from the observers around votes buying and negotiation around costs, monies at the polling units by some voters and even agents. You even have voters complaining to some observers that they were promised 5,000 and giving something lesser, or promised 10,000 and giving something lesser. And so it's quite worrying that we got reports around vote buying across different polling units. And then in addition to that was actually that sense of low enthusiasm. I remember going around to some polling units where in 2016, those locations were where you'd go and you would see a lot of voters waiting to vote. And then you're going back to those locations this time around, and you don't see the numbers. And it doesn't mean the numbers in the register reduced. I was in a polling unit, the register of voters, there was about 1,077. And as at 9 a.m., 9:30, we still had about barely 50 people on the queue. So it's just that sense of that low enthusiasm, and the numbers are not as impressive as you would hope. And so I think it tallies with some of our projections before the elections that we may experience low voter turnout in the process. With respect to security, we did observe security deployed to all the polling units, and reasonably they've been professional so far. But you know, usually the voting process these days are usually calmer. Is collation that you start seeing a lot of magic, let's call it that, for the purpose of this conversation. And so we would be observing the collation process because we know that that is still a weak link in our electoral process. A lot of times you don't have as much oversight, independent oversight in that system, because media, not all media reporters follow through the word to the LGA collation. Same also observers. So we don't have as many observers deployed at the ward level. We will be deployed in the LGA, that's Yaga Africa, and the LGA results collation, but not at the ward results collation, because that is a larger number of locations. So all in all, I'd say it's been relatively calm. We had earlier deployment, like I mentioned. We expected to have some lateness at the southern part. This is where you have the riverine areas, so the Elaje, Esodo, Kitipupa area in the state. And so we were not surprised to see some of the later commencement in those locations, because it's a bit hard to reach and when you look at the topography. However, I think, like I said, the focus now is on collation. A lot of the processes when it comes to voting has come to an end in most of the locations. If you look at the IREV, you have about 80-something% of the results for polling units already on the IREV. We're also observing the platform to see the pace of upload of results. And then much later, we can provide details on things like the deployment of the beavers and the details on how the beavers function throughout the process.
All right, Cynthia, you made mention of some issues that you noticed, one of which is vote buying, and you also talked about the fact that there seemed to be some level of voter apathy. On the issue of vote buying, I know that, that there are reports as regards certain figures. Like, how much were these people induced with?
Oh, okay. It went as high as 20,000 naira and as low as 5,000 naira. For those who wanted to give lesser than 5,000, the vote, like literally, had voters saying, "No, you told us 5,000, we can't go below that." Wow. So it was almost like a bargain happening at some locations. So 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. But from our report, the highest we recorded was 20,000 naira. We're not even sure what was the what bench line was used to determine who gets what amount. But sadly, this is what we are beginning to see this as part of the process. But I'm really hoping this doesn't remain with us as a developing democracy. It's unfortunate, but politicians, our leaders, I put a lot of the blame at their doorstep, because there is that point of the disconnect between the people and the state and government. Let's put it that way. You have citizens who are less interested in participating because they have not felt the impact of governance. And to them, they don't see the value of voting, because the last times or the previous times they voted, the leaders did not implement policies that affected them directly in a positive way. So the question for them is, what is the incentive to vote when my vote doesn't translate to policy leadership? And so that sense of disconnect and disengagement that we're seeing amongst the people is affecting even how they engage the system. So we have a lot more transactional relationship with the electoral process when it comes to voters' engagement. And that, for me, is where there's a problem. We do not want a situation where people winning elections are people winning because they bought votes. That in itself raises a bigger challenge on the value of a social contract, because if politicians believe that to win, you have to just buy votes, it also means they wouldn't feel a sense of responsibility to the people post-elections. And so that conversation needs to start happening. How do we get citizens to understand that you have a right and you need to exercise that right judiciously, but also to get leadership to work to deliver dividends of democracy? Because as it is now, we're having people losing faith in the process, losing trust in even democracy as a system of government, and that is a situation we do not want to have lasting for so long. And so I'm hoping that our political class, that they would have a sense of, I don't know if whether to call it a reformed mindset on how to engage the system.
I mean, it's basically...
Yes.
It's basically hope that the beneficiaries of this process, which are political parties, would sort of do something about the issue of vote buying. But Cynthia, we know that before the commencement of this process, the INEC chairman did say that they would improve on some of the fallouts or challenges or reservations that were observed in the just concluded Edo governorship election. So far, have you seen that, reflected in this process?
Well, if we would draw parallels, I think one of it would be the logistics management. We did see an improvement if we compare that with Edo. With respect to the deployment of materials, yesterday, the eve of the elections, we had also gone to the LGA, INEC offices at the LGA levels to observe the movement of materials from the LGA offices to the racks. That is the registration area centers, because that is usually the plan. They move to the racks, and then on elections day, they move to the polling unit. And we saw that happen. That is one of the things that we believe contributed to the earlier commencement of polls in Ondo State. So that's one part. The other part that we're looking forward to is the results collation. If you think about Ondo, Edo, sorry, beyond logistics, some of the complaints, some of the observations were issues around, one, the compliance to the rules. And I want to highlight important rules that we're hoping INEC is looking into. One is the decision on overvoting. Now, the law is clear on overvoting. Now, where there is overvoting, the results for that polling unit ought to be cancelled. And it's clearly stated in the law. Now, one of the things we had seen in Edo was the discretion in cancelling ballots. So where there's a decision made to cancel ballots in one location as against not cancelling in another location where they had clear cases of overvoting. And so that application of the rules on overvoting, we're hoping that it is done professionally and within the ambit of the law. That way, a party is not put at an advantage or a disadvantage. The second is the application of the rules on the margin of lead principle. And that is also based on the decision of cancellation, because the margin of lead principle is clear. It basically provides that where the margin between two leading parties is less than the total number of voters who collected PVCs in polling units where elections did not hold or were cancelled, elections would be conducted in those locations, or rather elections soon be concluded. So if at any point in time you have higher numbers of, or rather voters that have PVCs collected in polling units that were either cancelled, the elections did not hold, if that number is more than the margin between the two leading parties, then the elections can't be concluded. A return can't be made until elections are conducted in those locations. Now, like I said, these are important rules, because what we're beginning to see is the misapplication of the rules on overvoting to influence the application of the margin of lead principle. And we're hoping that for these elections, that INEC at the national especially, is an oversight system to check the collation process, the computation of results at the ward and LGA level. Those are very important points that needs to, because that is what fits into the state collation. So the completion of the results from EC8B and EC8C, those are the ward and collation level results. Those are very important. I'm influencing that. That was a major issue in Edo. And so we're hoping that for these elections, INEC is clear on how these rules will be applied. And I think the last part for us is issues around professionalism and response to complaints. The Electoral Act in Section 65 gives INEC the power, the new act, to review results if there are complaints that results were declared either involuntarily or not declared in line with the Electoral Act or guidelines. And so when we've had previous, at the last general elections and even Edo elections, where complaints were raised, the expectation was for the commission to activate its power under Section 65.
Okay.
We're yet to see the commission do that. So if there is any such complaint that the collation by political parties is also a call to INEC. INEC said they would improve this time around to respond to those calls, those complaints, and address that before the final declaration. That way, it inspires some sort of confidence in the process.
All right, thank you so much, Cynthia. Cynthia, let me leave you for a moment and bring in Chukwuma into the conversation. Chukwuma, you might just want to probably, react to some of the things Cynthia said, but you were trying to stress a point on the monetization of the process. I sort of caught you in between just to for us to listen to Cynthia. I would like you to land on that.
Thank you very much. So very quickly, politics anywhere on the globe is expensive. It requires some level of funding. However, what you will see in other societies, which you don't readily see here, the political parties don't really seem to have a lot of members, and that it then shows when it's time for the campaign. Because in other societies, we find that members volunteer their time, volunteer their money, and help to raise the sums required to campaign. But here, because they don't have ideologies that you can readily identify, readily understand, or readily explain, it's then a struggle to come out and campaign. Now, there are some basic things that must be spent. So if you're having a campaign, you have to rent a venue, you have to get the right equipment, audio and visual. You also have to have streaming equipment available. You have to pay for security, probably get a medical team on site. You have to get souvenirs. All of these things cost money. Now, what is the way out for Nigeria? Maybe we need to start this independent candidature business. For some reason, the political class here is against it. If we had independent candidates, right, they would not be bound by the conventions and the practices of the political parties, and then they can then appeal to their followers, and their followers can then help them raise the money. We saw that in the Obama campaign of 2016, where a lot of American citizens, both young and old, volunteered their time, their money, and other resources towards his campaign. Now, with regards to what the lady from Yaga said, yes, there are a number of things INEC needs to do. Does INEC possess the will to do it? That is the question. It's an abiding question that still remains to be answered. But generally, looking at what we witnessed today, so far so good. However, there is a caveat. The real magic starts at the collation level. So let's see what happens during the collation process and then what is eventually announced. But kudos to INEC, they've seemingly overcome certain hurdles. Let's see if they will overcome the hurdle of collation.
That's a big question, and I think I'd like to direct that question to Abimbola, who is in the studio. Of course, we know that Cynthia used the phrase, said at collation is where the magic happens. We know in Ondo State, for instance, there are still pending issues. I know for sure that I did have someone from TAP Initiative who sort of x-rayed the outcome of Edo polls and pointed out, according to them, some anomalies. And that brings to the question of the magic. Now, looking at what we are seeing in Ondo State, do you see any magic at all, at collation? Or will INEC, jump this hurdle successfully? Abimbola?
Oh, is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, I don't see any magic happening. The reason why I would think there won't be any magic is because the election is going according to plan. And what do I mean? The reason why I would like to say it is not over yet for our elections. Why? The reason why Ondo elections seem to be going peaceful, coordinated, well organized, the logistics were right, because I am aware that the larger area has always been problematic when it comes to logistics. But right now they got it right, because a lot of votes will be coming for the ruling party from there, so they had to get it right. So the reason why the election in Ondo is going well is because the party in power knows they know that they stand a bigger chance of winning if everything goes well. So we must understand that it is a game of interest, and that's why I keep emphasizing that the reason why things are not working is by design. The same way because things are working now in Ondo is also by design, because the ruling party knows that they have an overriding advantage, and they are working hard to ensure that things go smoothly so they can ride on that advantage.
I mean, definitely you can be rest assured that News Central will definitely be on top of this. But I'd like to say thank you so much, gentleman and lady, Cynthia Bamalu, that's Director of Program for Yaga. Thank you for your time. And also Chukuma Ezadairo, thank you so much, legal practitioner and also public affairs analyst. And also in the studio, Abimbola Oya Rinu is, of course, a researcher and a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen and lady, once again, thank you. Well, at this point, we will go on a quick break. Of course, the Ballot, that's News Central's special coverage of the Ondo State election, will continue. But first, we'll be taking the news. Stay with us.